In the Hills, we have 56,000 full-time people who are working here. This was as of February this year. 25,000 part-time, about 4,000 who are away from work, and only 3,700 unemployed, or 4.2% of 91,000 in total. So that just sets the scene of where we are, and obviously that's great. There were a number of strong performance indicators for the Hills in 2017 for business around revenue, profits, capital investments, and also staffing was a key one, i.e. it's on the increase. One of the biggest issues identified in the PSI, though, was the rising cost of staffing for people and businesses in the Hills. Away from the PSI for a minute, I think I've told people this before, but I have somewhere between 500 to 600 face-to-face meetings every year, either with our members, prospective people who are interested in joining the chamber, and then when they join. So I get a lot of anecdotal evidence, and the single biggest thing that they tell me in those meetings as their key issue is attracting and keeping the right people. And there's lots of head nodding going on already. And that's why we've come to have this panel today. It's been a bit of a passion of mine for the last couple of years, simply for the fact that I hear about it all the time. So without further ado, we're going to get into each of the individual panellists and where their skill set lies. We're then going to have a bit of an open discussion, and then we want a lot of participation. But I'm going to introduce David Leahy, who is on our end there. David is an accredited executive coach and is a director of Directions Unlimited. It's a business that specialises in people analytics that assists organisations of all sizes to attract, select, understand and retain high performers. His philosophy is straightforward: select people based on fit, not like them. Then challenge and support their growth and development. Get this right and you can spend more time on your customers and yourself. David Lee.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I think we're all in fine fettle after certainly Richard's getting us to do a triathlon just before lunch, so there's no such thing as a free lunch, as they say. So look, before I kick off, I just want to ask you a question. And the question I want to ask is, you know, when you're doing recruiting and you've decided to bring somebody into the business, is there anybody in the room who ever deliberately set out to hire a poor performer? Great. That's good, because that keeps my record intact, because I've actually never, ever met anybody who said I deliberately set out to hire a poor performer. And that's interesting, because what's interesting for me is that when we go and talk to business leaders and managers, and we ask them to rate their teams, they usually say things to us like 25% of my team, superstars, top performers, 50% are adequate or good, and 25% are substandard or poor performers. And that raises a question for me then, because I say, well, if nobody is setting out to hire a poor performer, why is it then that the accepted recruitment practices that most businesses use today only delivers the right outcome, a top performer, 25% of the time? What's the problem? That's what I want to know. And the problem really is that we just don't have enough of the objective information we need when we're making people decisions. We rely on things like resumes and interviews and reference checking and emotional connections. So we tend to hire people that we like. That's what we do. And that's a big issue for us, you know. So if the issue is that we don't have enough of the available information, what's the alternative to that? So there was a very large study released by the Harvard Business Review, and this study was conducted over 20 years, and they tracked 360,000 people. And what they were doing is they were trying to work out, how do you predict top performance in a job? And what they found out was that if you match people to their jobs based on their abilities, their behavioral traits, their personalities, and their interests, that's a key ingredient for top performance. So that's what job fit is matching people to the job based on their abilities, traits, and interests, as opposed to what we do in traditional recruitment, which is looking at educational qualifications and experience only. So that's the situation. That what they found in the study is that when you match people to the job based on those three factors, that productivity goes through the roof, and staff retention. staff retention increases or staff leaving decreases. So you get a huge kick as a result of doing that. And not only that, they found in the study that by establishing job fit, what happens is that you can increase your success rate of identifying future top performers by 300%. So that's pretty impressive. It's a 300% increase. So, which is great, and I'm sure that sounds all fantastic, but what actually happens in the real world? So what we do is we provide you with a recruitment toolkit that helps you to attract, select, and develop top performers. So we help you to understand who they are. So, example, if you were recruiting somebody, here's a bit of a warning about some jargon, but we create what we call a high-performance role benchmark. So in effect, what we do is we extract the behavioral attributes of the people that work with you to understand what they have in common. And then using that information, we provide you with an exact description of the person you're looking for to recruit in that particular role. And you can use that yourself, or you can give it to your recruitment company to help you select and attract people who have similar attributes as your top performers. But when you get to the selection part, that's where the real magic happens. So once you've decided on your shortlisted candidates, you've got 3 or 4 people you think can do the job, what we do is we invite them to take the job fit assessment using our job fit software. We develop a behavioral profile for them, and we compare it to the role benchmark that you've created. And we also provide you, as part of that selection kit, we provide you with an interview guide that has really tough, customized behavioral interview questions, and it's based on the results of the candidates that you've assessed. So you can drill into any areas that are potential obstacles for them being high performers in the job. And it doesn't end there. Once you've selected your top performer, they've signed the contract and they come on board, we provide you with a tool, an onboarding tool, to help make them effective as quickly as possible. If you think of it, something along the lines of like a user manual for your new employee. So look, I am conscious of time, but what I'd say to you is this. If your recruitment is working swimmingly and you consistently bring in 25% of your team are all top performers and everything's wonderful, keep doing what you're doing, don't change anything. But if you'd like to, and you're not happy, and you'd like to change something, and you'd like to experience adding some of the advanced science of the validated assessments that we offer, and at the same time increase your success rate of identifying future top performers by 300%, then I'd be delighted to have a cup of coffee or a chat with you. So thanks for listening to me, and I can assure you that the quality of the presentations goes up from here. Thank you.
Excellent, David. Thank you. It's 100% that it's critical, the people that you get in your business as a starting point. If you're putting round pegs in square holes, forget it. It's not going to work. But so many businesses do it because you hear it all the time. It's the thing that they whinge about the most. We're actually going to shift the focus now away from the person you may employ to potentially what are you providing in your business? What's the platform you're actually providing in your business? Pamela, would you lead us down a path, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. All right. So, assuming that you've got your top performers, why do they leave? Why do they leave your business? I think that's a question that a lot of us have. It's certainly a question I get a lot in my job. I guess one of the things that research tells us, and it's something that isn't very commonly known, is that when you employ someone, you don't just fill in a written contract with them that outlines the obligations that you have as an employer and the obligations they have as an employee. You actually also enter a psychological contract. And research tells us less than half of Australian employees are happy in their job, which suggests that at least half of the employees have experienced a psychological contract breach. Now, what do I mean by a psychological contract? It's basically expectations and obligations that you have towards your employee and that your employee has towards you. An employee expects that for their effort, for their time and for their skill, they get fairly remunerated, they get looked after, they're safe. You as an employer expect that your employees are going to put in maximum effort and they're going to use their skills to achieve what you want to achieve as a business. And that works well when it works. But sometimes breaches occur. And a good example of one that I see a lot is if is a promotion coming up, for example, big promotion in your organisation. An employee will start to work harder, come in, earlier, stay later, take work home. That employee expects to be given that promotion. They'll never tell you about it. It's just an expectation. It's unspoken. If that employee doesn't get that promotion, there's been a psychological breach. That breaks trust. It demotivates that employee. That employee becomes disengaged and eventually leaves. And we find that top performers are particularly good at having expectations around their effort. They perform well and they expect to be recognised for that. But that's never in their written contract of employment. So you as employers, understanding the psychological contract, how it works and what the expectations are, is a really important tool to keeping your top performers employed with your business. Now, one of the symptoms or one of the, key behaviours that you can be on the lookout for with top performers who are disengaged is workplace conflict. That's where I tend to come in. Most businesses that need my services do so because there's been a conflict at work. Statistics tell us that workplace conflicts have increased by 30% since the Fair Work Act was introduced in 2009. That's a lot of your time as a business going towards resolving disputes that you might easily avoid by understanding that psychological contract a little bit better. The other sad outcome, of course, of disengaged employees is that they leave. And the employee turnover in Australia at the moment is at 16% compared to 13% in 2012. That compares quite negatively to best practice, which says it should be around 6%. And interestingly, I won't have time to talk about this too much today, but please feel free to ask me later. Gen Y is at 25%. So at least a quarter of the Gen Ys that you guys employ will leave at the end of 12 months. All right, so why do people stay? Now, I come across this so often, employers who think they can measure employee retention by asking exiting employees why you're leaving. I'm telling you right now, it's too little, too late. If you were trying to fix your retention issues by asking people who are leaving why they're leaving, you need to be asking people who are staying why they're staying. You need to find out what works in your organisation, what motivates your top performers, and you need to celebrate that, encourage that, repeat that. And you need to work with people who are still engaged with your business. It's too late when they've resigned. They're not interested in helping you out. They're not interested in making a difference. The top 5 reasons that research tells us in Australia about why people stay, this is what they're looking for: job fulfilment and growth. People want to feel satisfied that their effort is being rewarded, that they're growing, that they're learning, and that they're developing. Inspiring leadership is a huge one. I'd love to talk about that, but I don't have the time. But what makes good leaders? Leaders who encourage open communication, leaders who actually lead by example, leaders who have integrity, and leaders who behave in the way that they want their team to behave. So there's a lot more to be said about inspiring leadership, but that is a key one. Performance focus, and I'll actually pass on to Jim in a minute, who will talk a lot more about performance. But people want to be recognised and rewarded for their good effort. And a lot of organisations don't place enough emphasis on monitoring and reviewing and rewarding performance. Values-driven. People are looking for values. People are looking for values in their organisations, values that they might hold dear, things like honesty, integrity. They want those values reflected in the place that they work. They don't want a conflict going from home to work and experiencing different values. And you'll find that if you hire people, as David says, if you select people with similar values to the values that your business holds, they are much more likely to be engaged and to stay with your business. And lastly, pride and advocacy. And this is one that I think addresses quite keenly the issue of recruitment. In the hills, we all struggle with that challenge. It's very hard to recruit people here. People want to work in the city. How do we get and attract people, keep people working in the hills? I'm telling you right now, if you can have a culture in your workplace where people champion your organisation, they will be your best recruiters. They will talk about your business, how good your business is to work for, what they achieve in your business, how good they feel about working for you. And they will bring people into your business. The kind of cost saving that you can make on agencies to help you recruit and, pour a number of candidates for interviews, it's just amazing. Let your engaged people be your recruiters. Would be about it for me. I'll pass on to Jim.
Thank you very much. So there's a bit of a switch there. What's happening in your business's culture? What are you providing in your business? It's not all just about the individuals you employ. Obviously, it's critical, as I said earlier, and the others have said, that you get the right ones, but what are you actually providing for them? Keep thinking about that, because we've got some more to think about now. I'd like to introduce Jim Davidson. As a business leadership coach, trainer and facilitator, Jim Davidson is a managing partner of Performance Culture Australia. They specialise in performance management, leadership, that word again keeps coming up over and over again, and workplace behaviour. Working with professional service firms, franchising organisations and Hills District business owners, Jim is committed to developing the performance and leadership of businesses so they become more profitable and valuable, which everybody in their own business wants, of course. Jim, can you take us down your path?
Absolutely. Thank you again. And we're shifting into culture. I feel a bit of a shift, and I think we may end on culture as well. So my question for you is, what is culture, and can you describe the culture in your business? So I like to describe culture as the visible behaviours within your business. Very simplistic version, but it's about what behaviours are happening in your business on a day-to-day basis. And then how do you actually change that culture? How do you develop a culture that you're looking to grow? So the key piece to that, and at Performance Culture, we have a very simple model around creating what we call a performance culture. The first thing we like to do is we will align an entire team and a business and an organisation. Question is, what are we aligning? What's aligning? Isn't that a corporate word? Isn't that something that's just used to sound fancy? No, it's not. We've spoken about values. So we're going to align values within an organisation. They're the core values of the business owners, the clients, the employees. We want to get all of us on the same page with that alignment. We then want to take that alignment to expectations. What expectations as a business owner do we have of our employees? What expectations do we have of ourselves, of our stakeholders, of our suppliers? We then also want to be starting to align on our vision and our goals and our objectives as a business owner. But most importantly, what we want to align within the business is our behaviours. If we go back to what is a culture, it is the visible behaviours. We want to set very clear behaviours, create alignment around those behaviours, so then we have alignment across the business. The next stage after we've aligned our organisation is actually starting to coach, and is developing a coaching culture within an organisation. There's a real performance management has got a real struggle and a real bad name at this point, is because it's all about pay and it's about termination, and it's about discipline. But what if I pose to you that performance management is actually about growth? It's about the contribution within an organisation. It's about having crucial conversations with your team, your partners, your loved ones about your business. And that's all around having a true coaching conversation. The key thing about coaching is that it's forward-focused. It's not backwards-focused. It's not hashing the history, and it's not hashing the misery. It's actually looking at the future and how do we get there. And we get there by changing behaviours. And finally, we then talk about lead. We want to create a leadership. And I believe that I've got the simplest leadership model in the world. Someone challenge me if it's not, but this is it. First of all we have to do is earn the will of our people. There's some very clear steps of doing that. It's creating direction, it's creating focus, it's providing growth, and it's facilitating effective change. The second thing we want to be able to do is communicate with clarity and purpose. Have you communicated your vision? Have you communicated your purpose with the entire team? It then comes back to alignment. And then finally, and probably the most important thing, is how do you provide appropriate accountability? That accountability is not only about the KPIs in a business and the results, and have we done X amount of sales calls? It's actually also about the behaviour within the business, and that also leads to crucial conversations. So there's a very simple 3-step model to be able to create a culture, develop a culture, what we would like to call a performance culture in your business.
Excellent. Thanks, Jim. So again, we're hearing more it's what you're providing in your business. What are you creating? What is the platform you have in your business to allow your employees to succeed? It's not just about them. They have to be the right people. But if they're the right people, how can we challenge them? How can we bring them on board? How can we embody them and actually have a true team? A lot of people have mission statements written up on the walls, and most of their staff ignore them and think they're complete. Well, I won't say what I think they're complete. Most people know what the next word would be from me. But we won't do that. See, we're all had a nice lunch. But it's true. They don't embody those words. Those words could have been created 10 years by people who aren't even in the organisation anymore. So what are you actually creating? You feel like you're getting grilled yet? There's a bit more to come. It's very interesting. This will be an interesting conversation to have as well with Anastasia. So Anastasia is the CEO of Pure Insights. I will move my mobile. A corporate EAP provider in employee wellbeing, mental fitness and training company. Think about those words. She is passionate about increasing awareness and education around workplace wellbeing, culture, and bringing happy back to that workplace. She has spent more than 13 years advising and mentoring executives and employees across a diverse range of industries in the areas of workplace engagement, well-being, culture, that word again, staff retention and productivity, backed by her vision to bring happiness back into the workplace to truly grow their people and their potential for greatness. Anastasia.
Thank you. So just a quick statistic. Anyone aware of the hours spent at work, roughly? Yes? Way too many. So research states, on average, we spend, you ready for it? 100,000 waking hours of our lifetime at work. And that's average. 100,000 waking hours. So the question that we all need to internally reflect on is, how are we spending those hours? And if we're in leadership positions or employee positions in organisations, what type of environment are we creating for the people that are coming in to support us on a daily basis if we're taking from them 100,000 waking hours of their life on average? Just a quick show of hands. Who's genuinely happy going into work? It's a pretty good result. I asked that question at a HR Leaders Forum when we have all the heads of Westpac, Woolworths, all of the big companies, and I got under a third of the room put their hands up. So they are the leaders of organisations that are responsible for creating culture and employee experience at work. So there's some big questions that we all need to be reflecting on as employers and influencers of the workplace. So there are lots of statistics about happiness and engagement. So what I would like to do today with you is just run through a couple of basic areas to keep in mind in your companies around creating a connected culture. So in our organisation, our tagline is connect, empower and soar. So you've heard through the three other panellists today about connection on different levels and engagement, but basic things is around transparent communication. We've talked a lot about vision and purpose. So when you're talking about vision, and Richard, you just touched on it now, is it words on a wall? Is it something that you as the organisation are aware of? But are your employees actually connected? So when people are going into organisations, they're looking for organisations they align with. So when we talk about vision in our organisation, is it something they also are connected to? Are their values also connected to our values in the organisation? And then the next step is, are we actually living and breathing those values? Because it's one thing to have them up on your intranet, it's one thing to have them up on your wall. But if you're not leading those values and your purpose through leadership and inspiration on a daily basis, how are you going to have employees connected to that as well? Another strong component of a connected environment is creating your own little community within your own culture as well. So what are some little things that you can do to create a connected community within your own organisation? Richard from Vision earlier got us to do cycling, and I had a little giggle and I really got into it. But Hardeep's aware, he came to one of our open days one day, and we actually have little bikes under our desks. So that's great for well-being, it's great for mental fitness, it gets a bit of competition happening and some great laughs. So we might be in a very serious conversation going through some work-related matters, and then you might have a couple of people cycling onto the little bikes, but there's little things like that you can do within your organisation. The other big area that we come across a lot in our work when we get called out to support organisations is people feeling that they're actually got a sense of their own purpose and having their own growth in the organisations. So supporting your people in identifying what their part in your organisation is, separate to what their job description is. That emotional connection is a huge area as well, but where is their own purpose and growth within your business, and how do you support that in them as well? So we've talked about leadership, and that is going to be, I'm sure, an extended conversation that we will have today. But having satisfied employees, as you can see, the statistics is great. Great return on investment. But having inspired employees is a lot more of a return on your investment if you want to look at numbers. But having a connected workforce and a support to your employees where you're experiencing their day-to-day 100,000 waking hours, I really, really encourage you to take away today and go back and reflect as an influencer in this space and my employees, what experience am I giving them on a day-to-day basis? How can I help them be connected and feel part of this organisation and have them as a bigger part and a bigger picture of this organisation? Thank you.
Excellent. We're going to go into a bit of open discussion, but we're going to have to shorten that up a little bit because, as you can tell, but all of these panellists have a depth of knowledge and experience. So if you've identified with these things, when we'll talk about it a little bit towards the end, it'd be worthwhile to have a chat with them after the panel, but we will have Q&A shortly. I just want to go to each of our panellists and just pose, and I'll need a short answer for this. Sadly, is what would and we'll start with you, David, and as you kicked us off, what would be the key reason a business comes to you?
The key reason a business comes to us is that they have experienced heartache in attracting and retaining great performing team members. They've usually examined their recruitment process and they can't understand why they just can't get any consistency in it. And we often tell them the reason is that there's inconsistencies in the selection processes that most organisations use today that wouldn't be tolerated in any other part of the business.
Very good. Pam, if we can get... this is a little different to the version we discussed, but we've wandered. But we've wandered well.
I would definitely say, as I said earlier, most businesses come to me because they have a conflict in their workplace. a conflict usually between a supervisor and a supervisee, or two co-workers that's taking up time, bringing the mood down for the whole business. And it could sometimes be as bad as having Fair Work involved, having an arbitrator, independent arbitrator, to try and sort through that process. Now, as a business, you don't want to be spending time dealing with workplace disputes. And my advice is always, what can this business do to avoid them happening? Keep your people engaged and happy, and they won't want to spend time in dispute. That's what I see the most.
Yeah, excellent. Jim?
Yeah, my clients come to me particularly if they're looking to be able to step out of what they're doing and they just don't have the skill set or the time to actually step out of their day-to-day role to develop their people. And so it's a real piece around developing that culture, developing the behaviour, and also giving them some inspiration to take the next step.
And Anastasia?
For us, it's a lot of what Pam mentioned as well, but also the holistic view of a person. So what I mean by that is, as we are all human beings, no robots in the room, I'm sure, we come with stuff. We all live lives, and sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. And we switch on and switch off. We switch our hat on when we get into work. But sometimes, regardless of what's going on, it's having an impact on our performance, on our engagement. And so companies are identifying different shifts in behaviours, potential little conflicts that are brewing. And when we go in and support around that, a lot of the time it might be stuff that's actually happening for the person that hasn't been identified or hasn't been articulated. So supporting that makes such a big difference in the connection back into the workplace as well.
Excellent. You've all been very well behaved, but now's your time to not be so well behaved. We want to hear lots of questions from you, so great. Gail.
A lot of the banks are moving to hot desking, so they're saying that they're only going to provide desks for, say, 70% of their employees, and the others will have to work at home. Now, I believe that that's really bad for culture, because you don't know where you're going to go in the day, you don't know who you're going to be sitting with, you may not be anywhere close to your team, but I'd like to know opinions as to how you see it.
We've had mixed reviews on that. So we work with a lot of organisations that have gone completely into open plans, which is another step before actually going into hot desking. So when you look at somebody's genetic makeup, we want to belong somewhere and have something that's ours as well. And so there is the pros of that for people that are used to, and I think the younger generations may be used to being able to be flexible and switch and change. But some people just need their space, that they know they put up part of who they are and that they're connected to. So I think it's a really big question. I don't know if there's any right or wrong answers. I absolutely believe that there's warrant in both, but I wouldn't have the complete answer to that. Anyone else?
I would just add, for businesses that I've worked with where that is part of how they do business, they tend to put a lot more emphasis on social activities and getting together outside of work as a group to try and develop some connection with co-workers, but also connection with the business and what the business stands for, because that's what you lose when you're sitting at home in front of a computer and not necessarily as part of a team. Especially for Gen Y. Siri, the research suggests Gen Y particularly want a sense of connection. So don't get that necessarily at home. Younger people tend to spend more time behind a computer and less time socialising at dinner with family or going out. So they get that at work. My advice would be, where I've seen it work is those businesses put extra effort into out-of-work functions and spending time together outside the pressures of day-to-day business.
I think the starting point for the organisation, if they're going to do that, is to make sure they understand the attributes of the people that they're going to ask to work in isolation. So they need to understand and measure and make sure they don't have highly social people who like lots of flitting around the office in roles where they're sitting at home looking out the window. So understanding the attributes can help to at least make it more effective.
Just a final comment on that. I'm personally challenged by it. However, working with a client who transitioned and very much into the agile method and the Scrum method and all this sort of thing, I sat down with a client, with a lady I was coaching, and I said, look, how do you deal with this? She goes, I love it. And she just really enjoys what it represents, the freedom it represented and represents, and what they do very specifically is they have neighbourhoods. So you live in your neighbourhood, but you can choose whatever house you live in, and so that's how they work it in one of the big banks. So yeah.
So we've got 4 answers. We have one more question, and that's the lucky winner there, Brian.
When you look at a lot of businesses, you look at managers. They don't like doing performance reviews. And you look at employees, they don't like having them. So my question is, why is that so, and why does that sentiment exist in the workplace?
It's all about the delivery, and it's about the consistency, and it's about the once a year I'm going to get a kick in the arse, versus having crucial conversations and having regular conversations and coaching conversations on a routine basis. And it's the surprise factor, and it's the effort. So it's about being able to provide all of that on an ongoing basis that allows the process to be actually very fruitful and very enjoyable.
The purpose behind a performance review generally is to give and ask for feedback on performance. And that's not a conversation that should happen once a year, not even once a quarter. That should be a conversation that can happen any day, at any time. And you as a manager or as a supervisor should be encouraging your people to openly communicate with you about issues around performance. And you should be encouraging, that kind of conversation with all your line managers and supervisors. If there's an issue with performance, deal with it at the time it comes up. Don't make performance review a negative. That would be my advice.
I think another response to that is creating a positive culture around performance in your organisation as well, and playing around with it. I mean, if you don't want to use the word performance, I mean, we've used something a little bit different called stop, start, continue, which is stop what's not working, start what you're not doing, and continue what you're doing really well. So it's covering everything, and also identifying it's not just from an organisational purpose, it's for the employee to grow and develop, which is in alignment with you, Jim, as well. So what's the skin in the game for them? You need to get them connected and motivated to want to see that as a positive process and what they can create and grow out of that as well.
Excellent. I think we'll wrap that up there. There's obviously a lot more questions in the room. I do honestly say to you, come and mob these people afterwards.